think for me, the question lives in something in the blood and bones, and making room for learning, for unexpected delight, and not overlooking the vast violence that has built my house, made my breakfast, and given comfort to some and devastation to others. So I don't think that it's possible to live a good life without holding that which is absolutely horrifying right now. You should be horrified. And the best way to hold that horror is, I think, also to recognize that life is moving. It's beautiful. It's moving. It's terrible. It's moving. It's creative. It's moving. It's destructive. It's moving. So not to take a rigidity in it, So I think for me, to live a good life is to, okay, fall on your face, weep on your knees, hold this, and then let go. And do not walk past the incredible spring and not notice that it's incredible. I guess for me, that's the good life.
Hey there, my name's Mark McCartney and welcome to the What is a Good Life podcast. Over the last 3 years, I've interviewed over 250 people around this question, not to prescribe you with the universal answer, but to help you to explore this question for yourself. I'm hoping the guests' musings, explorations, curiosities, and anecdotes will prompt your own inquiry into what this question means for you. While I'm also trying to share with you what I perceive to be more genuine expressions of the human experience and indeed more meaningful conversations. Which brings us to this week and the 98th episode of the What is a Good Life podcast, and I'm delighted to introduce our guest, Nora Bateson. Nora is an award-winning filmmaker, research designer, writer, educator, international lecturer, as well as president of the International Bateson Institute based in Sweden. She is the creator of the Warm Data theory and practices. Nora's work brings the fields of biology, art, cognition, anthropology, psychology, and information technology together into a study of the patterns in ecology of living systems. She wrote, produced, and directed the award-winning documentary An Ecology of Mind, a portrait of her father, Gregory Bateson. Her first book, Small Arcs of Larger Circles, is a revolutionary personal approach to the study of systems and complexity. In her latest second book, Combining, Nora invites us into an ecology of communication where nothing stands alone, and every action sets off a chain of incalculable consequences. She challenges conventional fixes for our problems, highlighting the need to tackle issues at multiple levels, understand interdependence, and embrace ambiguity. She was the recipient of the Neil Postman Award for Career Achievement in Public Intellectual Activity in 2019. In this engaging conversation, we delve into the dangers of certainty and the pursuit of fixed answers, exploring how moving beyond polarities can lead to mutual learning and understanding. We discuss the weaponization of language, the impact of divisive discourse, and how more generative and sacred communication can guide us toward deeper connection and shared presence. This conversation invites you to engage with life more fully as it is, its beauty and its horror, its creativity and destruction. It's a call to hold life's complexities with more openness, to embrace it, and to let it go as life continues to unfold. Look, I enjoyed this conversation immensely. It was a huge thrill for me to speak with Nora, and I took so much from both the conversation itself and listening back to it, so I'm sure you're going to take a lot from this conversation as well. And if you enjoyed this episode, please like, share, and subscribe if you're on YouTube. And please continue to leave your lovely reviews on the podcasting platforms. Please check out the show notes below if you want to follow more of Nora's work, or indeed to follow the podcast newsletter where you can read the reflections that these conversations you're listening to have evoked in me. So that's all I have to say for this week. I look forward to carrying on the conversation with you next week. So without further ado, the 98th episode of the What is a Good Life podcast. Nora, thank you so much for joining me today on the What is a Good Life podcast. Since following your work for quite some time now, I'm really excited to see where this conversation goes today.
It's really nice to be here, Mark. Thank you.
So, Nora, as I've forewarned you, the first question that I kick these things off with is the question of, is there a question you're trying to answer as you move through life?
Mm. I mean, I think there's questions that I'm continually living into. I don't know that I'm trying to answer them. Um, the the process for me has been kind of, I guess one of the questions is how not to get caught in looking for answers,
Yeah.
right? So the nature of some of the worst and most pernicious habits that have gotten us into these polycrises, metacrisis, whatever you want to call it, um, is, I think, derived from a hunt for certainty and clarity. So I've been trying really with all my might not to get into positions where I am locating an answer. First of all, it becomes too singular, right? Obviously, this is not pertaining to everything.
No,
Obviously,
no.
there's a time and a place to hold this open like this, and a time and a place when you just have to say, okay, so is it raining outside? No, it is not. Right? Um, but that doesn't mean it's not raining somewhere. And there's a way in which holding that larger context open is very important, and a way in which it becomes a kind of endless reflexive nonsense. So so what are the where are the existing cultural habits for one thing? So I'm noticing, when I come to the end of a lecture or a session in a course or something, and there we have this thing called Q&A. And I'm noticing that I'm really trying to play with that pattern of communication, because it's starting to make me really uncomfortable if somebody asks me a question and then I notice in my body this urge to answer it. You've asked me something, and because you've asked me, I want to respond with some kind of certainty. But if I do that, the certainty with which I respond actually becomes a problem. And it's tied into all kinds of things. Am I an expert? Do I know what I'm talking about? Do I have rigor under what I'm doing? Is there a reason you should even bother asking me a question? Because what makes me someone that you should ask that question of, especially if I'm not willing to answer? And these habits are built into credibility, respectability, um, accreditation. Certainly, when you look at the world of academia, this pattern is hardwired in, but it's always separating people. I think it undermines a world of potential communication that would actually hold mutual learning, and also how important it is to hold that uncertainty together. Um, Not as a endless quest for the mystery in a way that is shallow and silly, but in a way that actually is an ongoing rigor, an ongoing journey. All right, now that's the question and answer place where I'm living. So the questions, though, that I'm living in, um, I guess they're sort of implicit in that, right? So one question for me is, um, coming through what I would articulate as a quest for systems change, and recognizing that idea of systemic change is, by its very definition, wound into all sorts of processes, not only the institutions that we are living with and through and within, but also our identities, our families, our metabolism. Okay, how much protein is your metabolism used to? What's your way of relating to music? How do you communicate with your friends? So it's not just about changing the education system or coming up with a circular economy. It's much, much deeper than that. So for me, that is about really studying what happens in interdependency. And that's not an easy place because you can't really parse it out, right? It would be much easier if you could say, this is what we need to do to fix the education system. This is what we need to do to fix the political system. This is what we need to do to, but you can't actually do that because they're all wound into each other. And our identities are wound into that. And our identities become part of our relationships to not only ourselves and our bodies and our world, but our spouse, our kids, our friends. Who are you? Um, so systemic change is fascinating to me, and I think it should always have a question mark at the end of it. Um, so I'm looking at not so much how to address the structures, although they need to be addressed, but also what's in this underworld of or submergent world or subterranean world of imperceptible processes that hold our notions of self into the systems around us. Because I'm pretty sure we're not going to be able to change the systems unless our notions of self change.
Just
Yeah.
this lovely sense of I love how you put it. Okay, is it raining or not outside?
Mm,
Yes, it's raining, or no, it's not. But it could be raining somewhere, or it's
mm.
probably raining somewhere. How did you find yourself not arriving that, but even just embodying that sense of openness while, I guess, not avoiding, the plainness of things as well, by the sounds of it?
Hmm.
What's your kind of evolution even to a point like that?
Well, people have been working on this for a long time. I mean, this is definitely at the core of Taoism. It's, you know, Korzybski and the General Semantics crew have been working on this. What do you mean when you say is, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So there's been this development of a language E prime that has no is in it, and particularly so that you don't get caught saying, well, this is that. Well, what do you mean is? And to notice those habits is for me very challenging, of course, but also in this era where how things are is a world of weaponized language and communication that is so divisive. This is what's happening in Gaza. This is what a vaccine is. This is this. And that certainty is what? I'm not in the labs. I can't speak to what's happening with the vaccine. I can say, this scientist said this. I can say, this is what this news report says. But that differentiation is really important right now. Not because it is or it isn't happening, right? It is not raining outside. It's probably raining somewhere. And that tension is something that a lot of the world is used to working with. Okay, if you've ever lived in other cultures, there's different, if you're in Asia or in the Middle East or in many other cultures, there is a different way of holding these contradictions, which runs contrary, ironically, to um, the urgency of taking a stand in a singular way. And we are living in a moment where if you don't take a stand, you are complicit. So you have to choose which side you're on. Otherwise, you're on the other side. You're complicit with the other side. And this is dangerous territory because the communication that this is producing is driving people apart. And it's driving people apart on issues that are very complex, that almost nobody has all the information on, even the people on the ground, even the scientists in the lab. People are still, right? So there needs to be some outlet of, and we are still learning what's happening. And it is possible to keep understanding this. There may be things we haven't seen yet. But what is this isness that is so compelling? And I could probably get in big trouble for saying this, because it can become a kind of mental masturbation to just never come down on any particular point. On the other hand, it's also a weaponization of our communication. And when I'm asking what is systems change, what I am actually asking is what is in the communication that makes the relationships, that creates the interdependency. So the communication itself is really, really important. And so while I completely agree that it's important to stand up for what's right, it's also really important to pay attention to what reductionisms are happening in the stance that you take. And what's the difference between taking a stand and taking a stance? Right? And if you're in a stance, you can actually, if you've ever done any martial arts or anything like that, there is this notion of the stance. And that means that you can respond to things that are unexpected. There is a flexibility there, not in terms of being wishy-washy or second guessing, but in terms of a kind of strength of position. Right? So what I'm talking about is not being complicit or wishy-washy. It's actually being stronger by being able to be flexible. I mean, you can look around the world right now and you can look up any kind of information and you can look up the opposite and find all sorts of research that proves both of them are true. This is the world our kids are growing up in. So how do we parse this?
It
Yeah.
sounds so. It sounds like there's almost, even in that sense of a stance and a flexibility in responding to what is appearing or what may even be unexpected. It sounds like there is like also like a fierce attention. Like
Mm-hmm.
there's a paying attention to what is without resisting what is. Like it's kind of hard to come to a fixed conclusion of something when, even if I reflect on myself as a human being, there's things that I reveal to myself through different experiences,
Mm-hmm.
through different interpretations, through different environments. And so I am rarely at myself. It's very hard to define what I am at any given point in time in a fixed or
Mm-hmm.
static place. So it seems the way you're talking, though, it's not as you said, it's not to be wishy-washy. It's just if you continue to hold life or systems or an awareness of interdependence or relationality, you're going to newness or spontaneity will be revealed.
Mhm. And the possibility for continued mutual learning
Yeah.
in the communication remains open. Where taking a position that is going to create polarity is going to generate what my dad used to call schismogenesis. All
Right.
right, schismogenesis, schismo means break, genesis is to become, so it's the becoming of a breaking in the communication. And and so the way that you generate this is if you push, okay, you're going to create a pushback. If you are certain in a particular direction, that certainty creates a wall that things bang into. So, what is the way that we can begin to work with these situations, which are everywhere right now? And usually, what it takes is going to a kind of communication that is beyond the polarity, right? Is it raining outside? No. Okay. Someone could say, yes, it is. Fine. Let's go to a bigger picture or let's go to a smaller picture. Let's go right into personal story. What is my story of being outside? I went outside and my hair didn't get wet. And that is, I don't have to say it's not raining. I went outside and my hair didn't get wet. So I'm using a really inane example here with the
No,
rain,
no.
but it just to come down into that minutia of detail, which holds a lot of complexity. It's a story that includes me in it, um, and uh, the specifics generate a lot of pathways of possible ways the conversation, the communication can go, or to go big. Right? It's raining somewhere, and I don't know where. But at least when I've done that, there is an opening again for all sorts of pathways of communication. And what we don't want to do is block the communication because this becomes a problem, right? So, the classic case of this is that if you fight fascism, you make it stronger. And if you don't fight fascism, you make it stronger. So that piece uh, is vital, I think, in this moment to be really examining what does it take to actually recognize that the communication in that. So we can hop to the principle, fascism is wrong, and you can take a stand on that principle. Fine, but you have to take a stance in your communication because
You know,
otherwise you end up in nothing but walls. And that leads to violence, actually.
there's something really beautiful, I think, that happens even if it's in a group conversation or amongst even individuals, where one statement doesn't have to be, they both can just kind of hang or hover. Like
Mhm.
if you say something, I don't have to state my opinion. And even if it does seem in contradiction with what you've said, I don't have to state that it's in contradiction.
Yeah.
And I think, even especially with a group of people, when that occurs, there can be this lovely, lovely sense of just a number of truths or a number of experiences or points of data or whatever way you might want to frame it as all just coexisting together. And it almost does feel in complete contradiction to the sense of how I think a lot of public discourse is carried out at
Mhm.
this point.
Yeah.
What do you think allows people, or even from your own experience, what do you think allows people to open up more to that sense of, I don't have to find somebody else's, whether it's their own anecdotal experience or their own belief, that I
Mhm.
don't have to take that personally, that I don't have to perceive that as an attack, I guess.
Well, I mean, I my perception right now is one of the problems of this is a sense of belonging and feeling I belong with this group of people who are thinking in this way. And once that sense of belonging takes hold, it's very difficult to not start to justify. Well, I don't agree with that, but I agree with the rest of it. And pretty soon you can't do complexity anymore because your alignment in a particular discourse or conversation or positionality is triggered by a set of codes that if any of those codes violate your belonging, you have to go against them, even if you don't really agree with the whole thing. Right? So, I mean, I've been somebody who's voted in a particular way in my national elections, and I cannot look at the party that I have voted for and say that their hands are clean.
Right.
Right? I just can't do it. And yet, it's a sign of weakness not to uphold this certainty of loyalty, of positionality in that. I'm not a good party member because actually I'm super critical and I see the hypocrisy. Um, so so I guess what you're kind of bringing in is the problem of having conversations in the first place that don't start with a kind of scrambling because the habituated scripts, the habituated positions, the memes, the directionalities, the codes that are getting deepened by our social media algorithms, by our various groups, um, I think are actually coming to the place of making it very difficult to have something that we might consider a conversation and not just a delivering of different scripts that are pre-rehearsed, pre-versed, pre all sorts of things. And again, the stakes are too high. Okay? It's not that I'm saying it doesn't matter. What I'm saying is it matters too much. The stakes are too high to take the easy route of reductionist memes that generate polarity. We cannot do that right now. There's no way to answer these questions. I mean, things that have been going on for, more than 1,000 years, things that have been, generated through multiple directions and that are taking place in multiple cultures. There's not a simple answer to this. There's not a simple position. And the there is a way of being in an industrialized world, right? A thing that modernity has produced, which is this efficiency of communication that's just a tag. It's just a tag. This is where I stand. Boom. It's not enough. I mean, that's the big problem is and to have a pre-rehearsed positionality on any kind of response in any direction is simply um, it's simply not complex enough. And so that's why coming back to the beginning of our session, this this it's not so much that if you ask me a question and I give you an answer that I'm producing just an effective certainty. It's the meta message in that. It's the whole structure of that conversation that's going to give us a set of parameters that we live within that are premised upon the need for that certainty. That's the issue. So, what does it look like to really begin to be in conversation with each other in a way that is rigorous, that is holding that complexity not as a cop out or a bypass, but as a way of saying we don't have time. We don't have this we just cannot generate any more polarity and divisiveness, because through that we cannot make life. And the life is really what's in the balance.
There's something really almost deliciously kind of contradictory to the idea of, we just simply don't have time, so we can't just almost rush to a certainty.
Mm.
Um, there's also like a lovely sense, I think, of, I don't know, just even the idea that the complexity that we're avoiding, almost because we think it's almost that we'll think it will take more time to undo or figure out. The more time we waste with short-term certainties, the longer we put this, almost to me it feels like a bigger undertaking, or a more,
Mm-hmm.
possibly in the short term, a greater upheaval of even just how we perceive, communicate, our sense of being in life.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
What do you think would give people the comfort, or even a nudge, or a sense of knowing that that's more required? Because I think, there's so many trends in our society at the moment that says, okay, how we're approaching it, even though we are buying into a sense of certainty, I think people are feeling more of a sense of dissonance rather than a true belief in the certainty. Like, we're being told that this is exactly how it is, as you said, whatever
Mm-hmm.
the current issue is, that there's a certainty attributed to it. But yet there's something, I think, in us as people, that even when we hear that certainty, even the certainties we're being told are no longer that comfortable or consoling or comforting. Just from your perspective, what do you think helps people open up more, or embraces more that sense of uncertainty, rather than leaning into kind of short-term placeholders for what our ideas of this life should be?
Well, I am thinking about the situation with the vaccinations. And there were people who did not want to get vaccinated. And there were people who thought that if you didn't get vaccinated, you were a murderer. Um, and now we're a little bit past some of that. I mean, I don't think we're completely beyond it, but we're a little bit past some of that. Families were wrenched apart. Um, Marriages split. Um, Kids disowned their parents. I mean, people were fired. They lost their employment over one position or another. And that was just the beginning, okay? That was the first order of consequence. The second order of consequence was that the people who felt that um, their interpretation, their belief, their understanding was rejected, then turned to find belonging in another grouping that generated all sorts of other ideas. And things got conglomerated. Um, and then that becomes another thing that becomes another thing. So the problem with polarities is that they generate runaway. All right. So the polarity is not a first order problem. I mean, it is in that it's unpleasant and it's a drag. But what it happens in its aftermath, where that polarity goes, is really the problem, especially when it enters human society, culture, communication and interrelational process. So I'm curious, very curious about how holding those conversations where immediately I feel the urge to have a position and a polarity. I mean, I'm not innocent here. I'm not Mrs. Complexity over here. I'm feeling it too. Like, wait, what? No. Um, but recognizing not only what will happen in the communication I'm in the moment, but where that leads and the danger of that. Here's the thing. You asked what question and am I working on? What I perceive is that these years that we are alive in require new ways of responding. Being in relationship and being in interdependency in ways that we did not necessarily grow up in or become in any way trained in. And that whether it's ecological disaster or political disaster or cultural disaster or economic disaster or all of the above, plus health issues, mental health issues, this is our time of being alive. How are we going to do this? And there isn't an easy answer to that. There can't be an answer to that. That's why this grabbing of answers is problematic for me, because it's going to be different for you than for me. It's going to be different for people in my own household than it is for me. And that differentiation is vital. It is the ecology of the situation, right? So I'm really asking, with the idea that there is a way that those groupings of people who figure out how to cover for each other, how to be there for each other, not out of a model, not out of a rule book, not out of authoritarianism, not out of some downloaded play by play, but who have the stance, the improvisational possibility, capacity, practice to be there for each other. Those communities of people can pretty much meet whatever comes. And the
Yeah.
people who hate each other can't meet anything together. So that's sort of the question there is, what can I offer in this world that will in some way be generative of that capacity of being in mutual improvisation and learning? And that to me is the opposite of polarization. And that is where, for me, we're going to a place where communication is not what is said or unsaid. Communication is something sacred. Don't mess with it. Don't manipulate it. Don't cut it short. Don't make it too long. Don't fit it into your agenda. Don't exaggerate. Don't understate. Be careful with your communication. It's not just what you want to say, It's not like, well, everyone's thinking it, I'm just saying it, right? So that may seem like a bravado move, but actually it's just stupid. You have to recognize the context into which something is being communicated. How is it being communicated? What's the tone of the communication? The rhythm? What's the pace? What's the texture of the communication? What are the meta messages? What are the implications? What is the ancestral baggage in the communication? And that's not just verbal, that's nonverbal communication also. So Yeah, the patterns of communication. How do
Yeah,
we change
it's,
them?
I think there's, and it's just what I sense from that, but there's almost like an invitation for us to go inwards as well, to even
Mm,
to be able to even decipher what's, ancestral, what's my environment, who am I in this, and what am I offering. There sounds like there's a, and not in, I often see sometimes, even if it's someone's spiritual path or even some sense of self-development, it can be very I orientated, in the sense of, I do my meditation alone, I do my journaling alone.
mhm,
There's I think there's a lovely arc to that. The more that somebody notices the subtleties within themselves, that there's more of a subtlety even to the communication, or even the space between us. Like there's I'm hosting silent conversations sometimes, so it could be 10 to 45 minutes of silence before it
mm.
begins, and it's really just an invitation to notice, and not to close your eyes and meditate, but to be in a shared space with somebody, and to see what happens if we're all just still for a period of time. Because like you're describing here, this urge, and it's so clear, like even in sat in the silence, there's an urge that whatever question I may have floated, that I have a very clever answer to this that I'd like to share, because it will give me a certain degree of clout, and how that can just dissolve away if we just take a little bit more time. And it's not even fighting the urge. I think it's just noticing that things just settle down. And with what you're pointing to there, what I hear you're pointing to is really there requires a good deal of um, curiosity or investigation, or a an openness to share what presently is unfolding, not like not having come into a discussion with a list of points that I'm seeking to make, but literally, can I respond to what the moment is either asking for me? Can I respond to maybe what this human in front of me needs, without them having told me it? But I can be subtle with my perception of them.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm looking at this question all the time of who can I be when I'm with you? Who can
Yeah.
you be when you're with me? Not who am I? Because that's kind of a silly question, right? But because who I am with you is really different than who I am with somebody else. Not that I'm, you know, manipulating that. I'm just responding to the complexity. I'm responding to the situation, responding to the circumstances. That's ecological attention,
Mm.
ecological um, um, perception, right? If you were a little mouse and you hopped out of a hole in my studio here, the first thing you would do is look around what's happening in this context. So the idea that somehow should be protective of a particular shell of an image of who I am and just express that onto you without paying attention is actually just not very good ecological relationshiping. We need to pay attention to what's in the context. And if you don't, things shut down and you know, they break down and you get excluded. And I mean, imagine if you went to a party and you thought, well, clever people know stuff about Shakespeare. So I'm going to just, memorize Hamlet. And you went to the party and all you did was recite Hamlet. Okay, so that's not very interesting. It's not the appropriate response to all the questions. You're probably just going to be excommunicated from that, right? So what, by contrast, how do you pay attention? And the thing is that attention, you know, I think, this is just me though, that one of the best ways to allow this to happen is to recognize that it's not about setting yourself free. of these scripts and modes and codes. It's about allowing people that you're in communication with to be free of them. How can you be with them to allow them to let go? And then you see, it's about paying attention, like you're saying, about to the subtleties and the nuances of the context. But it's about paying attention in a way that is not about the individual growth. All right. I have to make change if I perceive you. And I really want to open the possibility. I don't want to hold you in the double binds and the schismogenesis and the polarities that we live in. I don't want to hold you there. I want to meet you. I want to learn with you. I want to go with you. You are not stupid. Okay. This is the thing that is existing in all these polarities. Those other people are stupid. I'm interested. What are you thinking about? And not just the first layer, because the first layer is going to be just script. Take it off the top, right? That's just the shell on the egg. Let that part go. So then what's under there? And who can you be when you're with me? Because if you feel like you are needing to uphold your positioning to protect yourself when we're talking, we're not talking. So I think, one of the biggest problems that we're in right now is that we're holding each other trapped. So, having grown up in California in the 70s, I've seen an awful lot of self-help programs. And my criticism of the self-help world is that, okay, the individual is interesting, but the self-help thing generated a lot of really narcissistic weirdos. So, I mean, it also really helped some people, but I don't think that it is appropriate for this era. In this era, the question is not how do I be a better person? The question is how do I be with you so that we can both learn and be in an improvisational, ecological, relational perception together. And that's a very different kind of question. How do I help you, help you? Help me, help you, help me. Right? It's not about me saving you or you saving me. It's the recognition that we are in communicational patterns that are traps that are holding our perception, our identity in particular configurations that are holding these whole systemic structures in place.
If we were to let go, I love the sense of I love the sense you had earlier that if you think a group of people were communicating in this way, that they would be able to face whatever is emerging or whatever is coming next. It's almost like there's an underlying trust in us or in humanity. Is there from your sense, like, have you ever even felt it, or even not even just per se in an intellectual way,
Mm.
like what might you imagine occurring if we were to simply let go?
Well, I think it's not like that.
Okay.
I think it's more. Have you done any improvisational work?
No.
Okay. So, improvisation is a great metaphor for this. Qigong is another great metaphor because what we're looking at is a practice. Improvisation is something that happens in the moment, but it doesn't happen in the moment without practice. So it's it's an interesting thing because in a sense it's about trust. Trust is always a kind of complicated word because it holds a lot of cultural baggage in one direction or another. But it's always kind of a razor's edge. Like, if I do this movement, what will they do?
Yeah.
I don't know. Like, is this gonna at any moment it could like, or it could get I could get in a place where I didn't know what to do. And so, whether it's, musical improvisation or theatrical improvisation or dance improvisation or I mean, conversation is improvisation.
That's definitely where I
Hopefully.
notice that the most. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Um, and you just don't know, like, what is this story gonna open? What is this gesture gonna open? What is this note, this chord, this riff gonna open? And it's not predictable. So there's no like, okay, and now we're all free. It's really a practice of being together. And the way we are together now, this habit of polarizing is also practiced. And that practice was really good for creating efficiency and productivity. The binary was useful for modernity. It is not useful in most cases. Not, I mean, binaries are still useful in some cases, but in most living situations, the binary is not useful for what we need to do now. So that that stretch is a practice, and there's no saying what it will open. Um, I don't know. So I don't want to imagine that future because I want to be there to have the possibility of listening for it, of tasting it, of paying attention to it, and not already have some idea of what I'm looking for. I've been working on this absolutely muddled recording recently with my team, and it was recorded in 1943. And we made the mistake of letting AI do a transcript. And then we thought we would listen to the tape and go through the AI and correct it. It's impossible because the AI turned the sounds into particular words, and then that's all you can hear. So I'm trying to imagine what this sound is, but I have already a preconceived notion of what it is that is disrupting my ability to actually hear it. We have to get other people to listen to it for the first time now because we can't hear it anymore.
That's a beautiful example to illustrate what you're saying there, and almost that I think you said razor's edge, but even for me, even the conversation just kind of takes me to the edge of my sense of knowing, because I don't know what the other person is going to respond. I don't know where it's going to go. And to me, that offers something. It really brings a sense of aliveness, or even a sense of adventure to my life, just purely by sitting down and having a conversation with someone. I don't have to go somewhere, or the act itself, or the unfolding, or being present for that, and observing or witnessing is, I think, one of the thrilling aspects that our sense of certainty kind of strips life
Mhm,
of.
mhm, mhm.
And yeah, I really like how, even to my question then of how would you imagine it, it's like, well, if I imagine it, am I really paying attention to it, or am I approaching it with the preconceived notion of an answer, even if it's even if it's even if it is framed as imagination, I'm still doing the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
For you, then, even when you mentioned at the very start this sense of like living a question as opposed to giving an answer, and then that sense sometimes that you might feel of like I have an urge to give an answer. Is that a kind of a in your process of that? Is that a continued practice then of like kind of almost letting something subside, or is it something you notice yourself get caught in and then you let release that sense again, or how do you kind of interact with that?
I'm practicing.
Yeah.
Of course, I'm falling in the same traps we all fall in, but I am practicing. I think the first time that I really, it really hit me. Well, that can't be right. I grew up in a household where there was always a dance around questions and the communication. So it didn't just fall out of the sky.
Right.
But my first husband and I were splitting, and we went to the marriage counselor, and she did a thing. I'm actually kind of grateful that she did this thing because it was a real moment for me. Um, she did a thing where she asked why I was leaving. And everything in my body wanted to answer that. I had a whole list of lists of things that I could say, why. And I could see in my husband's eyes that he wanted to know why. He needed to know why. And I took a breath to answer the question, and I realized whatever you say right now will be the story
Hmm.
forever. And in 6 months, you're going to have a whole different set of reasons. And in 5 years, you're going to see things you're not seeing right now. Be careful what you say. And so I was like, oh, what do I say? And then finally I said, I really don't want to answer that question. Not because I don't have reasons, but because I want the reasons to be able to change. Right? I want them to change. I want to learn. I don't want to get caught in the script of whatever comes out of my mouth right now. And I really don't want my husband to get caught with those words ringing in his head forever and ever. This is why she left. That's not kind to him. We need to be able to learn together. We need to. We will learn. We've been 20 years learning together. We're going to keep learning. And it was a big moment for me in recognizing those questions that pin you to the wall and create a concreteness that then just generates all kinds of trouble. It was so easy in that moment to say, I love him too much to trap him in whatever I might say or to trap myself. I'm not going to do that. Our reasons will change. And so that was, I wrote a poem about it. I just have to remember what it's called. I'll read it to you. But yeah, how do you answer those questions? So it's a practice. And that was a moment where I really felt the urgency of the practice. And I had 1 second to catch myself from falling in. Okay. Ah, yes, of course, it's called Therapy. This is a poem from Small Arcs of Larger Circles, my first book. And it's called Therapy. There is no why to ask. We are why. We includes inclusiveness. We are crooked trees in our forests, while why presumes there is an answer, erasing necessary ambiguity. When the arrow becomes liquid and slender directness smears, the target widens and the goal is edgeless. Non responses and no reasons authorize composting interactions, alive and learning with happy worms, down there where history is cultivating future. Come with questions that span eras, where sharp details are dethroned, blurred until eyes intent lose track, and the knowing moves again. When calamity is drenched through and piercing purpose is saturated, the soggy mess is muddied. Strange clarity spores into the undergrowth. Acute situations require action based on swift, clear decision, made in the muck and dripping with it. What will be pulling into place? Below, in the squish of life, there is no replacement part, nothing to solve. But we can breathe in the mess.
That's absolutely gorgeous. And the moment of having these lists of lists potentially in mind and just pausing and taking a breath before not trying to trap someone in a loop or a story, I think it speaks beautifully to what you were even pointing to earlier in the sense of I'm not just here to say what everyone need or is what needs to be said right now. There's a beautiful awareness in the context or the relationship, or even as you say, spanning wider arcs of time and knowing, I guess, the consequences or reverberations of what one sentence or one paragraph may be at a very important time.
Mm-hmm.
Just Nora, just looking at the time
Yeah.
and given what you've been sharing, the idea of living into a question, this sense of holding uncertainty, a sense of communicating, but which doesn't trap each other, potentially a movement away from this polarization of society. This as well, this holding this kind of unflinching attention, but also not fixing things even with a future imagination or prediction of what's going to come. You're using the examples of improv as well, of just staying present or being in this stance with life.
Mm-hmm.
And also the sense then of just this, not like necessarily seeking to change systems per se, but even just more focusing even on the interdependence or interrelationality of ourselves as well. Just really curious, Nora, to hear your answer to the question of what is a good life for you.
I think for me, the question lives in something in the blood and bones. Um, and making room for learning, for unexpected delight, and not overlooking the vast violence that has built my house, made my breakfast, and given comfort to some and um, devastation to others. So I don't think that it's possible to live a good life without holding that which is absolutely horrifying. right now. You should be horrified. And the best way to hold that horror is, I think, also to recognize that life is moving. It's beautiful. It's moving. It's terrible. It's moving. It's creative. It's moving. It's destructive. It's moving. So not to take a rigidity in it, so I think for me to live a good life is to, okay, fall on your face, weep on your knees, hold this, and then let go, and do not walk past the incredible spring and not notice that it's incredible. I guess for me, that's the good life.
I don't know. I felt like I was listening to a poem there. That was strikingly beautiful, and I'd fully echo the sentiments as well of just at times holding the horror and the beauty of life, and not looking away from either. And so, Nora, thank you so much for your time today, for your insights, not necessarily your answers, obviously. I won't hold you to that. But I'm really grateful for you joining us here on the What is a Good Life podcast today.
Thank you. It was a joy to be here.